Howdy, soldiers. Do you like my new rolling library ladder? I kind of love it a lot. I'm like totally calm and chill about it, right? It's not like, you know, this is one of the only childhood dreams I've ever had coming true before my eyes. My dad built it, so, you know, get yourself a dad like mine. I do need to put the brakes on now, though, because otherwise it's gonna be pandemonium. Brakes? On. I'm at the very mature age of 28 years old, which means that if I drink caffeine after 4 p.m., I'm gonna be up all night. Coke Zero, call me. I'm willing to grant myself an exception because today I'm going to be talking to you about all the books that I managed to read in September. September has definitely been the busiest and fastest month of 2023. I was traveling all over the place, I was hosting panels, I was doing work events. That being said, I did manage to read 5 whole books and 1 short story that I would like to talk with all of you about tonight. So without further ado, grab a drink, grab a snack, and buckle in as we go over the 5.5 books that I managed to read in September. More caffeine. I know I'm gonna give myself a tummy ache, and I have prerequisitely accepted the consequences of my actions. Oh my god, having a ladder here is so convenient. I can just like put things on it. First up of this month, the big ticket item. I managed to get an advance copy of this book, and I know everyone was losing their goddamn minds when it came out earlier this month, and that is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. Ava Reid is one of my favorite authors, and when I heard that her debut YA was gonna be a seaside gothic that had a kind of old-time fairy magic, I was on board. I was all the way on board. I was ready to commandeer the ship. This is a light magic or magic realism novel that is, I'm guessing, vaguely 1940s Wales, like the country, not the mammal, where in this world, people who create art or important things are interred as saints, and the latest saint that has been promoted is an author named Mirrodin, and his book Angharad is an epic fantasy fairy tale that our main character Effie has been obsessed with since childhood because she herself has been plagued by visions of this fairy king that Mirrodin has described in his work. Now that she's in college, she mysteriously gets a call to work as an architecture student on Mirrodin's crumbling family mansion, and when she gets to this isolated and decrepit house, she finds out that there is actually another scholar student from the university who is trying to prove that Mirrodin's work was false. So Preston and Effie are trying to unravel the secrets of Hirath Manor while also dealing with Mirrodin's only son, who is acting suspiciously, as well as Effie's steadily declining mental state as she starts to see more and more of the Fairy King and starts to think that more and more magic may be involved than they thought. A Northern Britain seaside gothic with immaculate vibes, the best atmosphere, and an unreliable narrator that keeps you guessing. They really capture that salt on the air off the ocean and the damp walls of this crumbling mansion and fey creatures wearing bone crowns that look smeary through the rain and hearing the toll of ancient bells from churches buried beneath the sea. Also this interesting look at how a nation splits and particularly how original myths and legends and gods create offshoots of one another when a nation is divided and like how they adapt on either side. Also, please note, if you are sensitive to this kind of thing, that there is a lot on here about older men abusing and over-sexualizing young women. A lot on how men underestimate women, particularly young women, and how misogyny takes over history and women get written out of their own stories. As always, the writing in this is gorgeous, but I did feel like the plot overall kind of petered out for me a little. The ending was a little on the nose, and then the climax of the book was like way too short in my opinion. A bit of an info dump backstory, and I don't know why it ended up like this because Ava Reid's other works have been like perfectly paced, really well written, like really impactful climaxes, and this just fell a little short. So even though this is not my favorite of Ava Reid's books, the vibes are immaculate and definitely make me feel like throwing myself into the sea. Speaking of which, another book that made me want to throw myself into the sea was Bring Me Your Midnight by Rachel Griffin. Oops, sorry, there we go. Did I get an advance copy in June of a book that came out in August that I didn't read until September? Who's to say? But if you are looking for a windswept romantic witchy YA novel about an idyllic seaside town with a dark magic underbelly, this is the book for you. Our main character, Tana, lives on a small isolated island off of the coast of a larger city where the entire town is run by witches, and her mother is the head witch in charge. From a young age, her life has been determined for her. Her mother makes her study light magic, and she is to marry Landon, who is the son of a wealthy landowner, to create an alliance between the witches' island and the mainland. But on her way to a very important midnight ritual in which witches release their pent-up magic into the ocean, she runs into Wolf, who she's never met before on her small island, and he says that he he can do dark magic. The two of them have an instant connection, and as they both sneak out to meet at night, Wolf is teaching her more about her own magic, and Tana is slowly unraveling all the secrets that are being kept from her own light magic coven. But as the ocean grows more and more violent and Tana approaches her own wedding and witch initiation ritual, she must choose between love and duty and what it means to come into who she really is instead of who people want her to be. The setting and the world building of this small, idyllic, magical island really pulls you in. You really feel a sense of community between the covens, and particularly with Tana and her best friend Ivy. There are amazing family dynamics that are messy and complicated, but at the same time still backed by love. The romance is breathtaking in the way that, like, I had to catch my breath multiple times. Wolf Hawthorne is giving William Herondale and Robin C. Kit a run for their freaking money. Living is about necessity, but she became necessity to me, like air and blood and magic. Absolutely vital. But what really surprised me was Landon. He was a character I didn't think I would like. I was expecting him to be this antagonist villain, kind of keeping Tana suppressed and, like, away from who she's meant to be and stuff. But their communication about, like, basically having to get married and how neither of them really want it, the way that they talk about stability and the future and, like, what their union means to a lot of people, like, it was sad, but it was also, like, so open and genuine and honest. There are also some darker themes in here on particularly safety and, like, women's safety, and how sometimes to keep yourself safe you need to be passive and not fight back. But then also how you get blamed for not fighting back. They want you to be powerful so that you can serve them, but then once you get too powerful, you're considered too dangerous. So you're constantly apologizing for your own power while also struggling to maintain your autonomy. So I would highly recommend this book. The atmosphere, the romance, the sea magic was all beautifully done. Ooh, I do want to talk about another Gothic, but I think I'm gonna leave my favorite of the month for last. So instead, we're gonna talk about a really disappointing short story that I read. So back in January, I read Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow, which is part of a short story collection that Amazon Prime produced, I guess, and I loved this one so much that I wanted to read more from the series, from the collection. So I happened to see fan favorite and personally adored author of Gideon the Ninth, Tamsin Muir, with her short story Undercover. And I'm very sad to say that I did not like this. In theory, I should have liked this because it shares a lot of things with Gideon the Ninth. It has an unreliable narrator, it has some kind of blood magic of some kind. It's a dystopian sci-fi with a lot of blood and a lot of gore, with morally questionable characters and a very ambiguous ending. Our main character is like a bodyguard for magic creatures, and they've taken on a job with a new gang leader in this kind of Vegas-inspired town where they're tasked to bodyguard a ghoul who also puts on like a gladiator fight / burlesque show in the basement of this like exotic club. But our main character, Amy, is also an undercover police, secret service, some kind of big name officer. And of course the proprietor has ulterior motives, and we're slowly piecing together the backstory of the ghoul who dances herself. Where I think this went wrong is that this world is way too cool and way too expansive to be shoved into a short story. This story is 60 pages and it is way too wild and weird for it to be able to like feel like a satisfying story. And I personally love when books throw you into the action and throw you into the world and kind of don't explain anything and expect the reader to keep up. But in this case, it just felt too rushed. Like I really would have liked to explore particularly the proprietor's backstory, as well as how this dystopian world came to be so involved with the supernatural, and the particular style of gorelesque that this dancer does, just so underutilized. And I'll admit, this is a personal thing to me. I don't read a lot of short stories. I don't tend to like that format as much, so maybe if you read a lot of short stories, you're gonna really, really love this, but I just felt like it was too good to be like a throwaway short story. So if she ever writes anything in this world or this universe, I would 1000% pick it up. But as it stands, I am going to wash this down the drain and then walk mysteriously into the mountains of the unknown. This next book I read purely because I felt like I was cheating capitalism. Audible was having a 3-month free trial, so I used my other account to make a new account to be able to get it, and now I have 3 free audiobooks. Audible hasn't asked to sponsor me yet, so I'm gonna continue to talk about cheating the system. But if I'm gonna read anything nonfiction, I would prefer to listen to it as an audiobook. So this month I used one of my credits to get You Just Need to Lose Weight, and 19 Other Myths About Fat People by Audrey Gordon. I'm already a fan of Audrey Gordon. I listen to Maintenance Phase, which is the podcast she co-hosts with Michael Hobbs, where they break down and discuss diet culture and the more popular diets and diet books and diet trends and the overall scams and grifts in the health and wellness industry. So in here she talks more about fat bias and fat activism movements, how doctors and other health professionals will equate health with weight, and the stigma surrounding people living in bigger bodies. And even though I have heard Aubrey and Michael talk about fat bias over like years at this point, it is still so fucking sad to hear her talking about it. Fat camps that lead young people to years-long eating disorders, blatant medical mistreatment due to biases over weight and stereotypes of heavier people, as well as the medical industry like not catering to people with bigger bodies. Like, for example, a lot of the medical equipment is not meant or made to hold people of higher weights, and how the youngest person to ever get weight loss surgery was 2.5 fucking years old, and how a lot of fat activism and acceptance movements have been commandeered by thinner, usually white women, so that fat people are actively pushed out of their own movements. Something that I really like she pointed out was about fat phobia, and how phobias, like, that means that you are scared of it, and that anti-fatness and bigotry is not the same as a phobia. A lot of things could be said with other types of phobias. So you're homophobic, are you? So you're scared of me, is what you're saying. But I think the best part of this book is that at the end of every chapter, there are some really good in-depth reflection questions and ways that the reader can take action. And many people, including myself, for a variety of movements, are unsure of what to do or how to help, so they usually end up doing nothing. So the reflection questions that Aubrey makes are really good guiding blocks and like touch points you can come back to later. Aubrey, your book was really good. Please, for the love of God, can you and Michael get together and make another episode of Maintenance Phase? It's been like a whole month and a half. This next book will be for you if you, like me, love epic, diverse fantasy novels filled with blood and war and dark magic and feminine rage. And that was The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. Tor sent me a book that is perfect for you if you, like me, also love books like The Poppy War and She Who Became the Sun. This is a queer and gender-swapped retelling of the Chinese classic The Water Margin, where our main character Lin Chong is the arms expert instructor at the palace training imperial soldiers until a powerful man with a vendetta against her rips away her power. She's branded as an outlaw and thrown out of the palace in hopes that she will die. But while she's on the run, she gets recruited into the Water Outlaws, a group of female and gender non-conforming bandits. But then back at the palace, we also follow the imperial lady Lu Jianyi, who herself is a philosophical woman and a semi-alchemist, while she is being blackmailed by a high-up counselor to create and then improve on magical weaponry. There's aspects of found family and brotherhood and dark magic and what you're willing to do to survive, but also the banding together of women against patriarchy. Also, there are magical alchemy tattoos and these things called God's Teeth, which are artifacts from like a past war that can open up portals and like funnel magic in through, and if you have to bond with one to be able to use magic. There's a lot on challenging authority and challenging tradition and the rage that builds up when men continuously push women down. Also internalized misogyny and what it means and the steps that you have to take to be a woman in power. Also, because the bandits are made of women and gender nonconforming and non-binary folk, the thing that they call non-binary people is of the 16 winds. So if you're non-binary, you're called a wind rider, and I think that's so freaking cool. What a fresh twist on a main character going on an adventure and overturning patriarchy. She's, I think, around 45. That totally makes sense, right? Like, she's been training for her whole life and she's been climbing the ranks, and oh, thank God that we finally have a late 40s practical woman who is not some dumb 16-year-old swinging around a magic sword. Like, she has done some shit. She is ready to do some shit. Like, she knows what she's doing. But also, she's like grievously injured for like 80% of this book. And I think that's the most unrealistic aspect of this. There is a surprising amount of murder in this book. And, also surprise, cannibalism. And ooh, the ending of this was just a heart-pounding series of tactical maneuvers and magical destruction. It is funny and terrifying and morally ambiguous and just full of rage, and I absolutely loved it. And who doesn't love a queer retelling of a classic novel, right? You show me someone who doesn't love that and I'm gonna show you a liar. And lastly, should come as no surprise, as I have been shouting it from the rooftops all across the internet since I finished reading it. I think I have found one of my new favorite books from an author who has written one of my other favorite books, and that is the modern nightmare of a Southern Gothic that was Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Vibes, mood, aesthetic, cool house, cool weird sentient house. Tor sent me a copy of a book that is Mexican Gothic meets the Hazelwood, but with like a cool modern adult voice. Eden, Kentucky is a dying mining town, known best for its best-selling author and illustrator E. Starling, who wrote this disturbing children's book called The Underland. People know to avoid the crumbling Starling mansion, along with the heir who still lives there. But after a chance and bloody encounter with the heir that leads to an unexpected job offer that she so desperately needs, Opal gets involved in Starling House in an attempt to make enough money to send her younger brother away to school. But as she spends more time at Starling House and gets to know Arthur better, she starts to learn more about the history of the book that she's been obsessed with since childhood, and how the nightmarish monsters may be more real than she imagined. Reading this gives you a general sense of dread, this kind of aura of foreboding. One of my favorite tropes of all time is cool house, and the writing in here is so beautiful. Starling House was no longer just a house. What had begun as stone and mortar had become something more, with ribs for rafters and stone for skin. It has no heart, but it feels. It has no brain, but it dreams. Ooh, girl, I loved the voice in this. This book had my emotions all over the place. We go from a sweating, stubborn, kind of urban grit of the city, to the macabre whimsy of this semi-sentient house and beasts of wind, to these gorgeous descriptions of grief and longing and duty. But despite Arthur and Opal having very different voices, it never felt jarring switching between the two. It just kind of like kept rolling into one another, if that makes any sense. And I love that everybody in this book is described as ugly. Like, the main character talks about how she has really fucked up teeth, and the love interest is described as like bony and weird, and like the lady that runs the motel has like a horrible haircut, and just the implications of that in this city is just so funny. Like, if you are above a 6, you need to get the hell out of this town. This is a beautiful story about grief and desperation and dreams and nightmares, loyalty and self-hatred and wanting better for yourself and your family, all wrapped up in a gorgeous atmosphere with the beautiful writing that Alex E. Harrow is known for. And that is that on that. Oh, all the tea leaves are at the bottom. Oh, I'm getting assaulted by bergamot. So there you have it. There are all the books that I managed to read in September of 2023 on planes, on trains, well, actually not on planes, on buses, on trains and buses. Where even was I in September? And though I am permanently behind on my TBR, I do feel like I'm falling behind a little bit because September and October for me are like prime high fantasy, spooky, gothic novel reading months, and I felt like September just happened so fast. And now we're already in the second week of October. I've been in a weird mood the last couple of days. I managed to finish the second season of Our Flag Means Death, the second season of Good Omens, and Red, White, and Royal Blue all within like 4 days of each other, so I'm just stock full of all the gay emotions. You know where to click to like the video. You know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are having a nice day or night wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!